This morning we're looking at Psalm 139, and this is a psalm of David, and it reads, "You searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise, you perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out, my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain." Sociologists have labeled the age that we live in as the information age. Never before in the history of mankind has there been so much information available to you, to me, at the click of a button. Some information that's being gathered and passed around out there in cyber world is about you. It's about you. Companies know your shopping habits, your preferences. Google Maps is aware of your location, your travel habits. Amazon's Alexa and Siri on iPhones listen to our conversations. It's a little more than scary for many people. It seems the future presented in George Orwell's book 1984 has come true. We live in the age of the infamous Big Brother. However, none of this information is new to God. Out of all the information that's out there, I'll log into something sometime and it'll give me a list and it'll say, which 4 of these cars have you owned? And I'm amazed sometimes at how it knows a car that I owned 20 years ago. All this information that's known about us, this data, it's no sort of update to God. He hasn't gained, nor does he use any modern technology to obtain information about you. He already knows. He already knows. God has always known it all. He knows infinitely more about you than any tech platform, as indicated by the text that we're going to consider this morning. The title of my sermon is God Knows. God knows. Now, the idea that God knows everything about you, it might produce a feeling of fear, feeling of shame. But ultimately, the idea that God knows everything about you and about me, the goal is to drive us to our knees and drive us to God. The knowledge of God, exhaustive, comprehensive, absolute, complete. There's nothing, not a single thing that God does not know. There's no fact too grand for him to know. There's no fact too minute of a detail for him not to pick up on. He knows everything. And he's always known everything. He's known everything that's ever happened. He knows what's happening this very second, everywhere, and he'll know everything that's going to happen tomorrow and the next day and the next day and every day thereafter forever. He already knows it. He knows it all. God knows. His knowledge is not limited by space. It's not limited by time. And that includes that he knows everything about us that has ever happened in our lives, everything we've ever done, everything we're doing, everything we're thinking right this very second, and everything we will think for the rest of eternity. He knows it all. I remember years ago I was talking to a man and I invited him to church, and I remember his response. He told me, he said, I can't go to church. If I step foot in the church, I'm such a sinner, I'll immediately burn up. And I was thinking about this, and when I was considering this verse and thinking about how the truth is that we fool ourselves in thinking that we're hiding anything from God. God already knows every sinful bit about us, every sinful thought. There's no hiding anything from God. But we do hide from him. I remember when I was a kid, we had this picnic. It was during the summertime, and we were sitting outside at these picnic tables, and my mom had fixed a plate of food for me and instructed me to sit there at the table and eat my lunch. But I really wasn't interested in eating. And I was having fun just joking around with people around me and other kids around me and carrying on and laughing and having a grand old time. And I was not interested in eating, which is what I was supposed to be doing. And this was a common problem that I faced. And so my mom's first resort of action was solitary confinement. So I got sent inside the house to eat at the kitchen table in solitary confinement, what I used to call solitary confinement. And there I was sitting at the table, and she said, "You can come outside when you've cleaned your plate." She walked out the door. I looked at my plate and I thought, I'm not going to eat this, and I'm going to go outside. And so I went over to the trash can that was beside the refrigerator, and I stepped on the little pedal and opened the lid, and I just scraped it into the trash can. And then, not understanding the concept of time, went over to the door, swung it open. "Hey Mom, I'm done!" At which point she came in the house, immediately went to the trash can, stepped on the pedal, opened the lid, and there sat my lunch. I couldn't hide anything from her. I mean, very little was I ever able to hide from my mom. But we do hide things. We do want to hide things, it seems, especially even from God. I mean, we think of Adam and Eve, the story is quite old, where the first thing that they do when they know they've done something they shouldn't have is they run and hide. As if they were hiding something from God. A God who knows it all. I guess perhaps one of the reasons why we hide things from people is, what if they really knew? What if they really knew some of the really crazy things I've done? What if they really knew the things that I've done in secret? What if they knew, what if my thoughts were broadcast and everybody would hear them? Well, nobody would want anything to do with me. Who would? I mean, we are a sinful people. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. But yet, you see, we fear that we don't want people to know things about us because that would change their view of us. That would cause them to value us less or to condemn us, to not want anything to do with us. But that's not how God works. God knows these things about us, and yet he doesn't love us any less. You understand the difference is that the way man works is that when we find out things about people that surprise us, we're shocked. There's no surprises with God. He already knows these things. There's no surprises. And yet, when he died on the cross, he forgave me for my sins. It's not as if my sins are forgiven past, present, and future. My sins were all in the future. When he died 2,000 years ago, he forgave me for all my sins. Like, everything was in the future. He had that foreknowledge, and yet still loves us the same. 100%. Never loves us less because of anything we've done. But yet, he still knows it all. I mean, here you have the Pharisees and these teachers of the law when they bring a woman before Jesus and she had committed adultery, and they said, "Oh, we caught her in the act. She'd been caught in the act of adultery, Jesus." And the law says that she should be stoned. What are you going to do with her, Jesus? It's almost like they thought that they were telling Jesus something he didn't already know. Like this wasn't new news to him. So he says, okay, so whoever is here without sin, go ahead, throw the first stone. Well, no stones went into the air. And so Jesus looks at the woman and he says, "Where are those who condemn you?" And he says, "Then neither do I." Because he didn't come to condemn us. He came to set us free. It was the law that condemned us. That is why it says in the scriptures in Romans that the law was given so that we would become conscious of sin, so that we would become aware of what we're doing wrong. That was the whole point. It wasn't that once the law is broken, now all of a sudden God becomes aware of the kind of sinner we are. No, it's that we became aware of the kind of sinner we are, and then we are driven to God. Not out of fearing like, oh gosh, once I confess this and he knows that I did it, something horrible, his condemnation is going to come down on me. No, it's the concept that he already knows that. So now I go before God and on my knees I confess this to him. It's an admission. It's, God, I'm admitting. You know that I did it. Now I'm admitting that I did it. And I need your love and forgiveness. And somehow, the vulnerability, the honesty, the sincerity of a heart, and then flourishes a relationship, a God who reminds me of his unfailing, unwavering, unchanging love. And so, we shouldn't run and we shouldn't hide from God. He already knows. And we have David in this passage, and David says, "You searched me, Lord, and you know me." It's a relationship with a God, and we sit before God, and we're still before God, and we say, "God, search my heart. You know these things about me that even I don't want to see myself. Now reveal them to me, Lord. Show me my ways." David was a man who had a relationship with God and allowed God to search his heart. Because there's even things about us that we don't like to see ourselves. Things we try to ignore. Things we try to act like isn't happening. That's not really going on. That's not really me. But then we have an opportunity to come before a loving God who's ready and eager to forgive us and set us free. And we can discover and we can delight in knowing that God knows us. He gets you. You remember that song, that TV show from years ago, Cheers? Don't we all want to go a place where everybody knows our name? I mean, doesn't everybody want to be able to go to a place where people get us there? They get us. They understand us. We don't have to exhaustively explain ourselves to somebody of why we did what we did. They get it. God gets us. I don't have to go to God and be like, God, let me tell you what I was thinking there. I was thinking that this is why I did that, and that's why I said what I said, and He knows why I said what I said. So maybe I can let Him take the steering wheel and say, God, reveal to me the intentions of my heart. Because He knows us even better than we know ourselves. You know what it's like, perhaps, when you know somebody and you know them sometimes even better than they know themselves. This can happen, in a relationship between me and my kids, where my kids will say something, or I'll try to advise them on something, or I'll say, don't do that, you don't want to do that, you don't want to put yourself in that position, and they'll be like, Dad, look, you don't know. And I'm like, I do know. I think I know something here that you don't know, actually. I think I see around the corner something that you don't see around the corner. And that's the strength that we can gain in our relationship with God, a God who knows everything, that He sees things around corners that we don't see, that we don't understand, that we could be complexed and bewildered and even angry with God and wonder, God, why are you leading me this way or that? And He knows things that we don't know. And His ways are ways in which are not our ways. And so we can trust and delight that He knows us even better than we know ourselves. It's Proverbs that talks about how a wise son heeds his father's instruction, but a mocker does not respond to rebukes. Well, how great of a God is our Father in heaven, who is all-knowing and has the foresight of the future and can see the things I cannot see. He sees my blind spots. He's not going to lead me astray. He guides me. And He says He's not going to leave me. He's not going to give up on me, no matter how many times it takes me to get it right. And here you have Peter. And in the book of Matthew, Jesus says, this very day before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And how quickly we forget, how easily we are prone to wander, and how often we are like sheep that go astray. And here's a God that sees something that we are not even willing to see ourselves. But we can come before Him and we can say, God, you know things about me that I am not even seeing myself. We have the part of this verse here where David writes to us and he says, you hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's like this idea that God knows so much about us. It can produce 2 kinds of emotions. The first is fear and shame. That comes from knowing that all of our life's secrets are known by God. His omniscience is a huge spotlight that shines on our nakedness. But this shame and fear is intended to drive us on our knees and ask God for forgiveness. I also want to point out here another response I think David intends in this passage, and that's to realize that God knows everything should bring us comfort. It should bring us peace. It's like a doctor who knows all about you and the disease you have. It's like having a good friend who knows you better than anyone else, but who still loves you and will stand by you. I don't know what it is that you're going through right now. I don't know what it is that's on your mind or heart this morning. I know this. I know life has its fair share of troubles. And Jesus told us that in this life we'll have many tribulations. You may be sitting here now and you're going through a period of anxiety or depression or sleepless nights. But when you lay there alone, remember that God knows. You might have some things in your past that haunt you, things that from time to time you think, man, I hope no one ever finds out about that. You don't have to worry and steer clear of God because He already knows. And He loves you anyway. You might have been lied about, people telling untruths about you. No one believes your side of the story. God knows. God knows. I'm reminded of that old spiritual song that says, nobody knows the trouble I see, nobody but Jesus. No matter your situation, while people around you have no idea what you're going through, where you might have been this past week, no matter what it is you might have said, or what it is you might have done, the thought is that God knows. You're on His mind. And the best thing about God is that He cares. He cares enough to search us, to be mindful of us. And His hand, it's almost as His hand goes before us, His hand goes behind us, and He holds us in His hand. That's the God that we serve, the God that we love, and the God that knows.